Hey folks, Pat here from DNS. This Madison area fishing report is current as of June 17th. I want to apologize for the lateness of this post. We've actually been pretty busy here in the shop this morning, which is great for business, not so much when you're trying to record a fishing report. So appreciate your patience there. Before we get started, I did want to just let everybody know about this cool group, Friends of the Lower Wisconsin Riverway. They're a nonprofit volunteer group that works to conserve and preserve the Lower Wisconsin Riverway and keep it the great resource that it is for paddlers and for anglers, and just a great group that does a lot of great work. You can learn about them here on their website. On their resources tab, they have a history of the river, river maps, but this cool paddle planner is a neat tool. Depending on how much time you have in your day and you want to go explore the river some, they got paddles ranging from 0 to 1 hours all the way down to 5 and 6 hour paddles, including maps that go along with it. So you click on a map and it tells you where you can put in and where you can take out, and it's yeah, a neat tool for anybody looking to explore the river. I bring up this group because they are hosting an event today. They host these field trips. This one is Fish of the Lower Wisconsin Riverway, and it's going on up at the VFW in Prairie du Sac. We're going to have folks from the DNR and fish biologist Timothy Parks and Dr. John Lyons up there electroshocking fish, and then they're going to bring those fish down to the VFW around 1 o'clock and do kind of a show and tell there. John Lyons is a friend of the shop and arguably the most knowledgeable fish biologist in the country, certainly one of the most knowledgeable fish biologists in the country. So it's great to have him there and answering any questions people might have about the fish, and telling you all about how they live in the river, what they do in the ecosystem, and how it all works. So it's a great opportunity to learn more about the species that swim in the river here. This event is free, but the group certainly appreciates any donations that you might be able to send their way. So you can go to the event and donate, or go on their website and donate. But great group. I'd encourage anybody to support them. Onto the report. This week we had lots of rain and wind and heat, so fishing was kind of tough. The rain we got here on the north side was about 3 inches, so some real heavy storms came through. This weekend looks beautiful, however, and the warm up this next week should keep things moving along as far as fish activity. The buoy out on Lake Mendota, last I checked, was at 69.6 degrees, so things are warming up as we move along into summer. Generally around the chain, bluegills are done spawning down here from what I hear in Kegonsa and Wabisa. Monona, they're finishing up, and on Mendota, they're more or less right in the middle of it right now. So Mendota is a bigger, cooler lake, so things are always a little bit behind here. So, but and I had some people ask questions about, because they said, well, I can't find the bluegills you're talking about up shallow. And from what I've heard, the bluegills aren't necessarily up in that 2 to 3 feet of water where you can just see the beds everywhere. It seems like a lot of the bed activity I've been hearing about, especially down here in Wabisa and Monona, have been out in more like 5 to 8 feet of water. Even some beds I've been hearing about in 10 feet of water. But I did see some side imaging stuff from a guy come in here, and he had hundreds of beds within 50 yards of his boat, and it looked like the surface of the moon in there. So the fish are out there. They're just, seems like they're maybe a little deeper than people are used to this year. Other than that, catfish are spawning up here on the north side. Smallmouth bass and walleye are moving out to deeper breaks and out on mid-lake humps. Largemouth bass are being found in the weeds along with perch, but the defined weed edge hasn't quite come up yet, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. Anyway, Cherokee up here, I've been hearing about the weeds are getting pretty thick in there, so making shore angling a little difficult and casting in general kind of difficult, but there are bluegills being caught in the pockets of the weeds. Some good largemouth bass action. I saw some nice fish come out of some pics of some nice fish coming out of here this week. And the pike seems to have slowed down here. They were just thick in here all spring. I don't know if it's the warmer water got them moved out to the main lake, but it doesn't seem like the pike are in there as thick as they were. The 113 bridge continues to be a great catfish spot. The fish have been in here spawning this last week, and a great opportunity in here as always to get a nice mixed bag of fish. I hear about walleye, sheepshead, smallmouth, perch, all kinds of fish in there. And then again, catfish up here in the shallow water on the North Bay. Also been hearing about some panfish in these areas, in the shallow areas up here spawning. Again, you're going to want to look a little deeper, I think, for those fish. Rather than the 2 to 3 feet, maybe looked at 5 to 8 feet. Seems like where a lot of the beds have been at. Around the rest of the lake, like I said, largemouth are on weed beds, in there with some perch being caught on weed beds. The weed line isn't very thick or very defined just yet, but that should come in another week or two, and then those fish will be a lot easier to target, especially the perch. I know that's what a lot of people look for this time of year, is to find that weed line and sit there and find some great perch. I've heard about some perch in the Picnic Point area, bluegills in University Bay. Again, a lot of the beds are out deeper, from what I hear. Walleye along the city shoreline still, those fish are moving out a little deeper. And a great mixed bag coming out of Tenney Park, right in um, uh, the wash here in the dam, for the Locken Dam, and then the break wall out here. Always a nice mixed bag of fish with that little bit of current that comes through. I got some good reports of action out here in the weed flats, just ripping lures across the top of the weeds, catching white bass, walleye, smallies, just about anything in there. So they've had some good reports. Good reports of white bass in the river, and largemouth bass and smallmouth bass, although those fish are smaller. Good numbers of them in there. And then the mouth of the Yahara too is always a pretty safe bet for some fish action. Olbrich up in this end, Monona, hearing about fish on beds, but again, those beds seem to be out a little deeper this year. Along the wall, I haven't heard much for panfish action along the wall, but I still see some reports of pike coming off there. Brittingham Park has been productive here in Monona Bay, along with the triangles, but that fishing also seems to have tapered off a bit since it was pretty hot and heavy here all spring. Lake Wingara, a lot of small panfish in there still. Some good largemouth action I've been hearing about, and a few muskies coming out of there still, mostly in the smaller, 30-inch range. But they're in there for sure. Over here to Turville and Squaw Bays, again, fish, still some gills on beds in these areas, although they're going to start moving off here pretty quick. And again, those beds seem to be out a little deeper this year than the typical shallow water. Fish on beds around the Dredge Hole in Mud Lake, bass in the shallow areas in Mud Lake, the bike path, trestle, whatever you want to call it there, railroad trestle, has some good current and always a pretty safe bet for a mixed bag of fish in there. Lake Farm, heard about the gills, are pretty much off their beds now and moving out into that 5 to 10 foot range in their post spawn areas, but the fishing should be pretty good for them out there. Heard about gills down along Christie's and Goodland, although those fish are finished up now. And I've heard about the carp down here have been muddying things up, making it rough for anglers down there to find panfish, but hopefully that clears up soon. I've been hearing about walleyes, again off the shoreline still, out a little deeper in that 20 to 25 feet of water. Trolling's been productive out there. And out from Babcock, and Babcock Lagoon itself has been pretty productive for largemouth and panfish. Down here on Kegonsa, the bluegill action here has slowed down quite a bit. I do hear about some yellow bass being caught occasionally in the Fish Camp Park area, and anywhere along the shoreline. Kegonsa's kind of a big bowl of a lake, not very much structure in the middle, but along the edges here, some good weeds and some good opportunities for lots of panfish and other things to find in there. So give that a look, and it's always great opportunities down there. But I guess that's about it for the chain here. Elsewhere in the area, we have reports of fish down here in Koshkonong. I've been hearing about some white bass and catfish in the Indian Ford area. Catfish up here on Koshkonong near the mouth of the Rock River, and good walleyes in there too. Been hearing about some white bass and catfish in the Fort Atkinson area, and also in Jefferson up at the dam that had some good reports of white bass up there. So also, let's see, up here on the Wisconsin River, nice mixed bag that always is coming out of the dam up here. The folks that attend that flow event today will see what a crazy mixed bag of fish is really in there. Smallmouth are in all their normal holding areas this time of year, summer holding areas. Look around sandbars and wood and areas along here, rocky areas, anything with current along the shores can be great smallmouth fishing. Up to Lake Wisconsin, I haven't heard a lot going on up here. Been hearing about some good action for walleyes trolling out here in Lake Wisconsin. Haven't heard that much for panfish, a few along the grade up here, but nothing very consistent. Up here to Portage and the Dells, I haven't heard a lot coming out of that area lately. Castle Rock and Pettenwell Dams, of course, always have a great mixed bag of fish up in there, as you always find on the Wisconsin River. I've been hearing about some good reports trolling out here in Pettenwell and Castle Rock, trolling for walleyes. It seems like the evening bite has been particularly consistent. On the Mississippi River, haven't really heard a lot coming out of the Mississippi. I think flows are down and fish are, they're catching walleyes in kind of the normal holding areas, but haven't heard anything very specific out of there. Same thing from Milwaukee, been kind of quiet. It's kind of that summertime where not much is happening along the shore. A few fish, I'm sure, being caught from the harbors in here, but I haven't heard much as far as shore angling goes. But the charters out here have been getting kings out there and cohos in the deep water, so that's a great time if you're ever feeling like doing something like that. It's a great trip. Other than that, not a lot going on as far as warm water goes. Speaking of warm water, the Madison area, we got a bunch of rain here, slowed down some of the trout fishing, making the streams cloudy for a while. But they should be cleared up by this weekend and in good shape for trout. I would look to use terrestrial patterns for if you're fishing dry flies. Beetles, crickets, and ants are going to be a pretty safe bet. Of course, streamers and nymphs are always pretty effective. And if you're using spin tackle, spinners and Rapalas and the like all work great this time of year. The one thing I did want to touch on in regards to warm water is we're getting into some of these hot days and not so cool nights. That warms up the creek temperatures, and they say that if you're fishing in water that's 67 degrees or warmer, you should not be catching trout. I know it's kind of a bummer if you get out there and you want to fish and you don't have, and then you find out the water's warm. But really, if you can stay away from fishing, pressuring those trout in that 67 degree plus water, it's really best for them. They have a lower survival rate. And so I would encourage anybody that, on these hot days here in the summer, go check out some of the many warm water resources we have for fly fishing in the area. We've got the Sugar River down here in Paoli and Belleville. There's the Pecatonica River in Blanchardville, my hometown. Lots of great areas where you can find some fishing on the fly for some great species. The Wisconsin River, of course, is a world-class fishery. I was talking with my buddy Kyle Zempel the other day. Kyle runs Black Earth Angling Company out of Mazamani, and he does guided fly fishing trips. Really very knowledgeable guy. Really has his finger on the pulse of. They do trout, they do lower Wisconsin smallmouth trips, and they do pike and muskie trips. But he really has his finger on the pulse of what's going on in the river. He says right now, bait fish or smallmouth have been corralling bait fish all over the river, and concentrated mostly on. Zooming in here. Look at these sandbars. Look for the downstream side of sandbars where it's deeper. Look for wood along the shores. Any current can be good, but they're chasing bait fish, which I hear are very plentiful this time of year. We got good populations of shad and emerald shiners. The pike and muskie fishing has been good, but tends to be best early in the morning and in the evening hours. With these hot days, they kind of tend to take a break during the middle of the day. But thanks to Kyle for that great report, and give him a look if you ever want to get out and explore fly fishing on the Wisconsin River. Otherwise, I guess that's it for the report. Thanks for hanging in there. We made it through, and I encourage you to post your comments and reports down below, and call the shop if you have any other specific questions. Otherwise, I wish you all the best of luck. Happy Father's Day to all the dads out there, and yeah, I hope you guys get out and find some fish. Thanks for tuning in.